Okay, great. I can see the live stream now. Sorry, live chat. So we'll get started here in a minute once we have more than 3 people. It's really weird to just talk out loud with no feedback. So please feel free to chat. Okay, we're gonna get started here. Obviously, everything is completely fucked right now. I'm sorry for all you guys and everything you're going through. I feel that the best I can do for you at this point is continue with business as usual, so that's what we'll be doing. If you look at the new syllabus, let me pull that up real quick. Okay, I've updated the syllabus. Here's the YouTube channel. Obviously, you know that because you're all on it right now. Well, 51 of you are on it. You are all going to get full points for attendance. That was my plan all along. So, spoiler there. We've pushed stuff back here. Your third homework is due April 20th. Your third exam is April 22nd. If you have any questions, please check the syllabus first. Obviously, feel free to email me. I'm home constantly. You can still email the TAs and also Silas, so feel free to do that. No, this class is not pass-fail now. We will be grading the same as before, except that everyone gets attendance points. Okay, alright, so there's the syllabus. Here's what I did while we were gone. It's Karen's birthday party. Look how happy she is. Wow, look at that cute face. Okay, we have a little bit of a lag here. There's nothing I can do about that at this point. Okay, here we go. We're just going to get started. Okay. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Oh my fucking God. That is so annoying. Okay. Let me wait a minute for the stream to catch up. I have office hours over Zoom after this. My Zoom number is in the updated syllabus. You can also feel free to email me. Email me your extra credit whenever you finish that. That is due at any point before the very last class. No, sorry, Katie, the syllabus has been updated. Someone already pointed that out to me, that it looked like I was expecting you to do things over break. Don't worry about that at all. I've updated it so that those dates are now correct. Sorry about that. Okay, we're going to start chapter 8 today. We're talking now about different setups of economies, different environments in which firms can operate, and how these environments affect how the firms act. This is our spectrum of competition. Along this spectrum, we have 4 distinct points that we will be discussing. On the very left here, we have perfect competition. That's what Chapter 8 is about. That's why it's highlighted. And then as the spectrum continues, we end here on the right with the monopoly. Of all these words, you're probably most familiar with monopoly, if you're familiar with the others at all. In a perfect competition, again, the kind of economic structure we're talking about here in Chapter 8, we have many firms, and they all sell completely identical products. When I say many firms, for all intents and purposes, you can imagine that we have infinite firms in this industry. Because this is a spectrum, we have to start at some point, so perfect competition obviously does not truly exist in reality. It's a theoretical starting point. We start off assuming there are infinite firms and infinite consumers, and that the firms sell absolutely identical products. And then we can adjust that theoretical model to get to more realistic economic environments. So we're going to lay down this theory first of perfect competition. I guess you can't really see because of Karen's stupid face. Okay, that's fine. So in a perfect competition, essentially infinite firms are selling identical products. There are essentially infinite buyers. Everyone has perfect information. Everyone knows exactly what is for sale, how much it costs. They know exactly what they want, which is very important. There are also no barriers to entry or exit. This is important. There are no costs to entering an industry. You don't need to apply for any kind of business license. You don't have any kind of startup costs. You don't need to make friends with the firms that are already in the industry. And there are also no barriers to leaving the industry. So you'll see as we continue, there are infinite firms. Yeah, you don't need to see my face, Carl. You'll see as we continue that if there are infinite firms and infinite consumers and no barriers to entry or exit, that we will have firms constantly, continuously, infinitely entering and exiting the market. And again, this is a theoretical starting point. There's another vocabulary word here. Give me 1 second. Another vocabulary term here, new one for you. Firms are price takers. Price takers. This means that if you are a new firm and you want to enter the market, you have to charge the market price. Firms cannot set the price themselves. Firms cannot set the price themselves. Oh my God, that's so bad. Whatever. Firms cannot set the price themselves. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Oh my God, I gotta keep going. I don't know how to erase it. Okay, firms can't set the price themselves. They have to charge the existing market price. And we will discuss exactly why that is the case in one moment. This is because the demand faced by the individual firm is perfectly elastic. There are infinite firms that I can buy this product from. So, if the market is charging $3 for a tomato, and your firm enters and decides to charge $3.50 for a tomato, nobody is buying your tomatoes. You're out of the market instantly. As soon as you entered the market, you are now out of the market because the demand is perfectly elastic. Because firms are constantly entering and exiting the market and there's infinite of them, we will see that in the long run, profit is going to be equal to 0. And again, this is a theoretical model, so don't think too hard about this, just believe what I'm telling you. Profit is going to equal 0. Okay, so if we want to talk about what kinds of goods will be for sale in these 4 different market structures, the example I like to use is that we live in a world where we buy and sell shapes. So in a perfect competition, there is only one thing for sale, and it is a red square. You can buy red squares. Keep this in mind as we continue. I'm going to keep using this example. In a monopolistic competition, which we'll get to, don't worry about that. In a monopolistic competition, we're going to have for sale, just for an example, we'll have red squares, we'll have blue squares, and we'll have red triangles. So we're starting to see, towards the middle of this spectrum of competition, a differentiated product. Don't worry about this for right now. I just wanted to get it in your mind that I'm going to be talking about very simple goods for sale, such as red squares. Okay, so the market as a whole, all the firms together operate on the regular supply and demand diagram that we're used to, right? It makes sense that if you increase your price, quantity demanded will decrease, just like we've been talking about this whole time. However, for the individual firm, we have this perfectly elastic demand. If you set your price above the market price, you're going to go out of business instantly because no one will buy from you. And if you set your price below the market price, you will also go out of business instantly because you can't handle the overwhelming amount of demand. So, a perfectly competitive firm is not able to choose the price that they charge. That's already set by the market. They only have one decision they can make, and that is how much to produce. So price is set for us. Price is set, and quantity is the thing we can mess with. Just draw it like that because you can mess with it. Okay. Okay. Here's some things you need to memorize. This is the same list we had on the last page. I've just elaborated on a few things. Give me a minute for the stream to catch up. Everyone. I set the stream to slow so we wouldn't have any buffering problems, but I think it is too slow. Okay, all right, here we go. So this is the same list we had on the last slide. I've just elaborated on some things here. Here I've elaborated on the perfect information we were talking about. There's 0 knowledge costs. Consumers and producers have perfect and instantaneous knowledge of all prices, attributes of goods, their own utilities, their own cost functions. There's no barriers to entry or exit. Some examples of barriers to entry and exit, mostly barriers to entry: startup costs, government regulation, a competitive response from existing firms. In reality, if you tried to open a carbonated beverage business, you'd probably just get destroyed by Coca-Cola. And then economies of scale, which we talked about in the last chapter, those do not exist in a perfect competition. There is no benefit to being a larger firm or a smaller firm. Firms are price takers, like we said. When you enter the market knowing that you will be charging the market price for your good. You can't mess with that or you will go out of business instantly because we have perfectly elastic demand. This essentially, profit's going to be equal to 0 in a perfect competition. Where's my mouse? Okay. Profit's going to be equal to 0 in a perfect competition because if firms within the market are making profit, if profit is greater than 0, we will see firms entering the market. And if profit is less than 0, we will see firms exiting the market. So if you take a snapshot of this consistent entry and exit of these infinite firms, it's going to show you that profit equals 0. Again, this is a theoretical starting point from which we will examine other economic structures. So don't worry too much about why this is true. Just memorize it. Okay. Any questions on this slide before we move on? All right. Okay. You wait for the stream to catch up here. Now we're talking about profit and loss. Sorry, I'll adjust the stream settings so it's not so slow next time. Here we go. Okay. So we're talking about profit and loss here. This first graph, don't get overwhelmed by this. We're going to walk through it together. This first graph shows the quantity of raspberries that a farm is selling. This is in your book. And then on the y-axis, we have total cost or total revenue. So this first graph, we're talking about totals. And then we're going to regraph these numbers with marginals. So let's start with the total graph over here. Here's our total cost curve in a perfect competition. It's sloping upwards because we have increasing marginal cost. Our total revenue is a straight line here. Yeah, the book's online, Deacon. You can get it in the syllabus. I've said that a million times. Okay, sorry. Sorry, Deacon. Okay. The difference between your revenue, the money you bring in, and your cost, the money that you put out, is your profit. So we want to be producing at the point where this cost is as far away from our revenue as possible. That makes sense, right? So this profit line is literally just graphing your cost minus your revenue minus your cost. That's why it's negative down here at the beginning, and then we see a bump over here. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't get overwhelmed by this graph. Total cost here, total revenue here. Total revenue minus total cost equals profit. And so this is what we're graphing. And we're showing that at this point where total revenue is as far away from total cost as possible, that's the same point here where our profit line is greatest. Okay. So if we take this total cost curve and we transform it into a marginal cost curve, and you all know how to do this. This is the same thing we've been doing with all those charts I've been giving you, where I give you the quantity of oranges you're consuming and the total utility of the oranges, and I make you fill out the marginal. That's the exact same thing that's going on here. We've taken some point on this cost curve, subtracted the point before that, and then that's our marginal cost, and then we've graphed it here. Boop, 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 boop. So these numbers are exactly the same. This is showing the exact same farm. We're still selling raspberries. We've just changed from total to marginal lines here. So you can see that our profit maximizing point, our point from the total line, is at the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. And this is something we've been talking about for a few chapters now, that profit is maximized at the point where marginal revenue equals marginal cost. Questions on that while the next slide loads? Silence. Just the deepest silence I've ever experienced. Okay, so same graph as before. This is our totals graph. The total revenue, that's a straight line, and the slope of total revenue is equal to price. This makes sense, right? Total revenue is just the money you're bringing in from what you're selling. So if you sell 1 tomato and tomatoes cost $3, your total revenue is $3. If you sell 2 tomatoes, your total revenue is now $6. So the slope of this total revenue line is equal to the price. I don't want you beating yourselves up about this. I don't want you panicking. This is just an illustration. And if this helps the idea of perfect competition click for you, that's great. But I don't want you panicking. You know that I'll tell you exactly what you need to know for the exams. Okay. Total cost slopes upward at higher levels of quantity. As we produce more packs of raspberries, our total cost becomes higher and higher and higher and higher due to diminishing marginal return. This is something we've talked about. If you buy a raspberry picking machine and suddenly you're able to pick twice as many raspberries as you were before, do you then decide to buy 1,000,000 raspberry picking machines? No, that wouldn't make any sense. We have diminishing marginal returns from the inputs that we use to produce our output. This is the same idea as too many cooks in the kitchen that we've been talking about. There's an ideal number of cooks to have in your kitchen, and after that point they start stepping on each other's toes. There's not enough room for all of them to work. Maybe they're speaking too loudly and they can't hear each other. We've got diminishing marginal returns, and that's just a law of economics. Okay, maximum profit occurs at the quantity where total revenue is as far from total cost as possible. Questions on that while the next slide loads? We'll actually skip this next slide because we already went over that. I didn't realize what weird last names you guys had until this chat. I put Karen in dog jail for this, which is what we call the balcony, and she is not happy. She's very upset with me. Okay, all right. This is incredibly important. I cannot say it enough. I cannot say this enough. This needs to be running through your head constantly. In a perfect competition, price equals marginal cost equals marginal revenue equals average total cost. And profit equals 0, as we've already said. But I cannot possibly stress this enough. You need to know this. Not because it's going to make you an amazing economist or help you open a business in this theoretical market structure that doesn't truly exist, but because 1, I told you to, 2, it's absolutely going to be on your homework, 3, it's absolutely going to be on the exam. Free Karen. In a perfect competition, price equals marginal cost equals marginal revenue equals average total cost. Okay. Profit equals 0. If firms existing in the market are earning profits, we will see more firms entering the market. More firms entering the market is something that shifts our supply curve forwards to the right. As the supply curve shifts outward to the right, our equilibrium price will go down. As price goes down, economic profits will decrease until they become zero. I'm going to draw this out for you. I'll freak Aaron at the end. Okay. So we've talked before about, things that shift. I'll draw the things that shift the supply curve. And one of the things that I mentioned was the number of firms in an industry, but we didn't really get into that because it wasn't relevant at the time. Oh my God, this is so bad. The department gave us these. They're not great. Okay, great. Our old friends, supply and demand. I know you've missed them. They've missed you. Here we have our equilibrium quantity. Here we have our equilibrium price. And notice that I am not drawing the demand curve as perfectly elastic because I'm not talking about one individual firm. I'm talking about the theory of all firms that exist. And it is still the case that if you increase your price, demand will go down, and if price goes up, supply will go up. Okay, so if firms are earning profits, more firms will enter the market, and that shifts our supply curve outward. I usually don't use the terms left and right because I myself am very bad with left and right. So this is our new supply curve out here. As it shifts outward, you can see our new equilibrium where our new supply curve meets our original demand. Now we have a lower price. Quantity has increased. Okay. If price goes down, we don't have as many firms wanting to enter the market as before, and in fact, firms that have already entered the market are now starting to leave. So this constant back and forth of prices going up and firms entering, and then prices going down and firms leaving, ends with, theoretically, profits being zero. At least I'm not losing expo markers anymore. It's so true. Okay, the next slide loads, I'll tell you something terrible that I've done. Mere hours before they announced that the business school was closing and we were not allowed back in, I had gone to the store and bought a bunch of bananas and brought them into the office. And now those bananas are sitting in the office, and they will be there for 3 months. Oh my God, I just can't believe that. Okay, all right, so the next slide has loaded. Here we have a visual illustration of the long run for a firm in a perfect competition. Marginal revenue is a straight line here. Why is marginal revenue a straight line? Because demand is perfectly elastic, so price is set by the industry. Marginal revenue equals price in a perfect competition. So marginal revenue is this straight line. And then we have our marginal cost is upward sloping like this, just like you're used to seeing. This is our old friend that we were drawing for a few weeks before you went on break. More like RIP, everyone liking me in the office. At this point, where our marginal cost hits our marginal revenue, that's our profit maximizing point. This also happens to be the point where price equals average cost. And if the price you're selling tomatoes for equals the average cost of producing a tomato, you're not making any profits. So profits equal zero. If you're a visual learner, this is hopefully a helpful way for you to start to believe me that profits are going to be zero in a perfect competition. That's in the long run. Next slide is loading. These will be up on my channel after this. So, if you're ever unable to stream, you can just watch them on the channel. Don't forget to mash that like and subscribe at the end. Okay, so that last graph was our long run, but why do we have firms entering a market if they know that their profit's going to be zero? Well, because the short run also exists. In the short run, let's say that the price of a tomato is $5. This price is greater than average cost. The price you're selling a tomato for is greater than the cost of you producing that tomato. So you're making a profit. Great. But this is going to entice other firms to enter the market, so your profit will be driven down to zero. I like to think of this is kind of an intense example, I like to think of this as like sharks with a feeding frenzy. If you're a shark and get your hands on it, you get your mouth on a juicy seal, and you're just digging into it, and it's great, other sharks are going to be aware that that is happening. They're going to come in, and theoretically, infinite sharks would be drawn to this situation until there was such a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of seal to go around that essentially every shark gets zero seal. Kind of a gross example. Sorry about that. Okay, this next slide, I know it hasn't loaded for you yet, but it's just going to be showing the opposite of what we just talked about. That if your price is less than your average cost, you are losing money. And so this is going to cause firms to exit the market, driving price down until profit is zero again. Let's get that. Okay, so this is a graph you've already seen. You all did actually a great job on this part on your exams, unlike the other parts of your exams, which you all did terribly on. The shutdown point, as you all already know and demonstrated to me on the exam, is that a firm will shut down when marginal cost is equal to average variable cost. In a perfect competition, marginal cost equals price. So, a perfectly competitive firm will shut down when price is less than the minimum average variable cost. So, we talked about when you draw average total cost and average variable cost, that they should cross marginal cost at their absolute lowest points. Well, if your marginal cost or your price is less than your minimum average variable cost, you need to shut down. But if it's greater, you're going to stay open. If your shutdown point is less than your price, but also less than your break-even point, the firm is making losses, but will continue to operate in the short run because you're covering your variable costs. This is why a lot of restaurants are open during lunch, even though they don't see as much business. In addition to being open during lunch, being a good advertisement. Giovanni, no. Why would you have open note exams? You guys are getting greedy with this pandemic. I'm going to upload these slides for you so you can look at them. We're going to move on to chapter 9 because the next few slides are really repetitions of what we've just done. So here's the takeaway from chapter 8. In a perfect competition, price equals marginal cost equals marginal revenue equals average total cost. Profit equals 0. There are infinite firms and infinite consumers, and one exactly identical good is for sale. You just started learning virtually, Giovanni. Give yourself a chance. Okay, chapter 9, we're going to continue along this spectrum of competition. We're going to go all the way to the other end. So perfect competition, we did that. Now we're on to monopoly. This is the exact opposite side of our spectrum of competition. In a monopoly, one firm sells the product. So here we still have red squares for sale, but there's only one firm selling red squares. Oh, sorry, it was lagging. There's only one firm selling red squares. We can see how this would create a much different environment than infinite firms selling red squares. Now the consumer is not as in charge as we were before. Initially, when we were talking about perfect competition, if any firm dared to charge even 1 cent more than any other firm, we wouldn't buy from that firm and they would go out of business right away. Consumers were in charge of price. Consumers decided how much we were willing to pay for tomatoes, and firms would then decide if they wanted to enter or leave the market based on that set price. Now, we're in a little bit of trouble. There's only one firm that is selling this product. How does this come to happen? How do we get to a point where only one firm is selling a product? Wouldn't we see a situation more like perfect competition, where if a firm is making positive profits, we see more firms entering? Usually we would. However, remember that one of our assumptions of perfect competition was that there were no barriers to entry. It cost nothing to enter the market. Now, however, we do have barriers to entry. There are legal barriers, technological barriers, or market forces that discourage or prevent potential competitors from entering a market. We'll talk more about these. There are two kinds of monopolies that exist. One is a legal monopoly. This is where laws prohibit competition. The government has said that only one firm is allowed to produce something. You can only send letters by the postal service. There's also a natural monopoly. This is where barriers to entry are something other than legal prohibition. Something like Liechtenstein has a very rare gem underneath it, and it just so happens that the borders of Liechtenstein exactly match the size and shape of this gem deposit. They're the only ones who have access to this, and so they naturally have a monopoly over the sale of this gem. Natural monopolies can arise in industries where the marginal cost is low. An example of this would be cell phone providers. Your fixed cost is relatively high. You have to build all these cell phone towers, but once you have them built, the additional cost of adding another user is very, very, very low. Katie, yes, absolutely. Patents are a cause for legal monopolies. We'll go into that on the next slide. Natural monopolies can also arise in smaller local markets. Brewpub has a natural monopoly over the Alpha Blonde beer. If Chestnut Brewing Company came out with an Alpha Blonde beer, frankly, it would be weird. They would probably make an enemy out of Brewpub. And it's just not a smart move from a business standpoint. So in this smaller local market, we've got a natural monopoly over the Alpha Blonde beer from Brewpub. Also, when a company has control of a scarce physical resource, this is like the gems we talked about with Liechtenstein. So reading on this next slide. Okay, so there are several ways you can maintain a legal monopoly. All right, but I should say legal. Katie asked if a patent is a way to maintain a legal monopoly, and it absolutely is. God, these suck. Okay, how to maintain a monopoly. Patents. A patent is a government given exclusive right to make, use, or sell an invention for a limited time. There's trademarks, an identifying symbol or name. People will only buy your thing because it's a brand name, so you have a monopoly. EpiPen is a legal monopoly, Joseph. Mylan is not sitting on the only EpiPen spring in the world. There's also a copyright. This is just a form of legal protection to prevent copying. And one that I think is super interesting is trade secrets. If you just don't tell anyone how you make something, then they cannot compete with you. Trade secrets don't involve any kind of government intervention, which is why they're my favorite. They just include secrets and espionage. Okay, so we've got a list here of barriers to entry and how the government is involved in them. We've got, if you're a natural monopoly, being a natural monopoly is in itself a barrier to entry because you have control over a natural resource. That's the example we're going to use for natural monopoly. You have control over a natural resource, and that's just the reality of life. A lot of times the government will respond with regulation here. They'll say something like, we're going to divide up these gems below Liechtenstein, and we're going to give half of them to the De Beers Diamond Company, and we're going to give half of them to whoever else wants gems. An example of a natural monopoly, water companies and electric companies. These examples are kind of natural monopolies for the natural resource reasons we talked about, but mostly because the marginal cost of adding another user of electricity is super, super, super low once you've already set up your electrical grid. If you have control of a physical resource, like the gems under Liechtenstein, there's not a lot the government can do about that unless they want to divide up that property and give it away to other people. De Beers Diamonds is an example of this. They own all the big bad diamond mines. So the demand for diamonds until fairly recently was very inelastic because De Beers was the only one selling them, and you got to buy your girl a diamond. So De Beers knows that if they increase the price exponentially, they're not going to see that much of a drop in their sales. But what has happened over the last few years? We have begun to see lab-grown diamonds that are indistinguishable from natural diamonds. At first, lab-grown diamonds were distinguishable from natural diamonds. Gemologists and jewelers could tell which were which, but they could tell because the lab-grown diamonds had no flaws. So we've seen this demand for diamonds flatten out and become more elastic over time because we have this entrepreneurship and this innovation in lab-grown diamonds. Okay, that was an aside. Okay, we can have patents, trademarks, and copyrights as barriers to entry, and the government can assign these patents, trademarks, and copyrights. The government can say this is your idea and you own it, and no one else can use it. These are things like new drugs and software. Oh, I skipped over legal monopoly. Sorry about that. The government absolutely has a role in a legal monopoly. Things like the post office. In the past, we had regulations for airlines and trucking. In New York, years and years ago, this elderly couple was struggling to pay rent on their apartment, and so they offered to deliver letters for people who lived in their building for a small fee. And they were doing it for less money than the post office was. So people started going to this elderly couple and asking them to deliver their mail for them. The government found out, came in, and shut them down. Another barrier to entry, intimidating potential competitors. If you decide to open a carbonated beverage business and Coca-Cola knocks on your door and they've got 6 guys in suits and sunglasses and they shake you down, you're probably going to close your carbonated beverage factory. Okay, we will end there. The first thing we're going to do on Wednesday is a dramatic reading. I have Zoom office hours after this. You can get the link to those in the syllabus. All right, thank you very much. Goodbye.